Welcome to another Quantum Conversation. I'm Loren Gailey, and I invite you to sit back as we enter the quantum realm, that space of the greater part of you. It is your connection to infinite possibilities, infinite potential, and infinite mastery. Welcome, 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 beautiful souls. Thank you so much for joining us today. This is a special episode of our Quantum Conversations Summit Series, Timelines, Creating the Highest Benevolent Outcomes. And today we are with Arcturian Master Healer, Jean Ang, who channels energies and frequencies from the Arcturians and many other more cosmic frequencies, interdimensional beings and such. We are talking about Arcturian multiverse transmissions, quantum multiverse transmissions. Let's welcome Jean Ang to this beautiful conversation. Hi, Jean. Thanks for being here.
Hi, Laura. Hi, everyone. It's great to be here. And I love the topic of the summit. It's just really fascinating. And I think a really very timely, so to speak, topic for this new age and where we're emerging into as very quantum beings, interdimensional beings, and multidimensional beings.
Yes, multidimensional beings. And so there's a question that I just got from a viewer this morning that I think is a great way to start our show today. We have been hearing so much about timelines lately. That's actually the inspiration for this summit series, because we have the power to fuel our timeline, to feed our timeline. And what's interesting is in the past, we were creating timelines and not even being aware of it in the most part, right? Maybe some spiritual teachers were aware of it, but for the most of us, we were just going along creating. And now we're starting to realize, wow, there's something here, especially if someone is looping in a timeline. And so as we start, why is it that you feel timelines are the word of the hour? Why is it popping up in the mainstream so much? And what are timelines?
Mhm. Yeah, I think that's a great place to start. And I was just, what was coming to mind is just exactly what you said about how it's really emerging into mainstream consciousness. I think movies are a great barometer of mainstream consciousness because, like executive producers aren't going to spend speaking of the multiverse, multi-million dollars on any topic that wouldn't draw the attention of people. And the ones that come to mind, maybe in the order in which at least they emerged for myself, was sliding doors. That was a very interesting use of timelines that will explain where Gwyneth Paltrow, the kind of main and protagonist, is presented with two possibilities where I think her boyfriend either makes it into the subway, and then there's one possible timeline, very distinct experience for her life, or he doesn't make it into that doorway, or maybe it's her of the subway. That's why it's called sliding doors, and she has a completely different life. I think she finds out he was not faithful to her, and changes, her entire trajectory. The other one, of course, more from the child example, but maybe people watch this too, is Spider-Man and the Multiverse. Speaking of, which was about maybe 3 or 4 years ago, and that again is another indication of this idea of not just multiple timelines, but multiple universes that we may be existing on. And then I forgot the last name of the movie, but I know Michelle Yeoh, who's kind of famous for her Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon martial arts movie, but she was in, I think she won an Academy Award. Do you remember the name?
Everything all at once.
Yeah, that was a great where she's shifting all these different timelines in order to kind of figure out the entire mystery of the story. But to define what the timelines in my understanding is that yes, the one understanding, and this comes from quantum physicists who would accept this explanation, at least in theory, that every time we have infinite number of dimensions and existences, and they're not all physical per se. that every time we make a decision, and that really leads to this infinity idea because we know how many conscious decisions we make in a day. The possibility of the other decision exists, just like in the Gwyneth Paltrow movie. It may not exist in our experience of space time, but it exists at some relative dimension. So, for example, we could have done this now, or we could have decided to do it at another time. So we both would have been doing something different if we didn't do it now. So that other timeline where we're not having this conversation, and maybe also now people might not have been listening to this conversation, it exists. We would have been doing something else, just to kind of bring it very close to home. So that's one. I'll just stop there, but that's one understanding of these sort of timelines that we're creating, this infinite number of timelines based on our decisions.
Yeah, that's mind expanding and mind blowing, actually. And the way that, and so it almost takes us into the topic of parallel universes. So if we make a decision, especially if we put our feelings and emotions into it, right? There's something that's said about that. There's something about the power of it. So, for example, I keep going back to this one example that was used for me, like when we were in high school. Say, for example, we had a crush on someone or a boyfriend or a girlfriend. There could be an alternate reality where we're actually married to that person. So what do we do then in this case? I mean, it's like, wow. Is it necessary to call back all of these decisions into our wholeness, or how would we, on that interdimensional, multidimensional level, how would we reclaim all of this?
Mhm.
Is it
Yeah.
necessary?
Yeah, no, that's the great thing. Once you have the framework of the infinite timelines, particularly personally, what do we do with that, and what are the implications? I'll just mention one more science fiction movie that actually came out on Netflix. I'll have to find again the author and the title, but and maybe some people here who are science fiction buffs know it. But this author was, of course, as many fictional authors are prone to do, writing from his own experience. But the basis of this science fiction novel that was turned into a series in Netflix was that the Allies did not win the World War II. The Axis won, and it's set in the United States, and basically Germany controls most of the eastern side of the United States, and Japan controls like the west coast of the United States. And so it's very interesting and fascinating that this would be another very relevant, if we think about it, possibility of a different sort of felt or experienced reality that would probably affect all of us in the entire world. So I think the first thing is to maybe right now is for just like what Lauren did, is to think of a very relevant decision which probably required a lot of thinking, maybe a lot of emotional energy. It could a lot of times it is within those teen years in the 20s, just for a person in the modern age, because they're usually either deciding to leave home, maybe for work, for military service, for college. They're kind of exiting the nest, so to speak. And there's a lot of different decisions being made there. And to think maybe of the one or two, and sometimes there's multiple possibilities. Like for me, it was like choosing between certain colleges and exactly how that played out in that period. And one implication, and this actually comes from an author, his name's Robert Moss. Maybe some people know him. He's very involved with dream work and shamanic work. And the piece is that if these dimensions do exist, then they are able to be accessed. And the question is how to access them. What are the tools, the consciousness technologies to access them? And since they are part of our consciousness, or some aspect is linked to us, then and that could be another framework to fully understand this, which we could talk about. But back to this practical aspect, then we could still gain information from that life that we're not living currently in space time is one implication. So if we could, for example, many people here know, or this is one tool that I'm aware of or know how to practice is you could use shamanic journeying, which is a way to alter your state of consciousness to access other dimensional states, other dimensional beings who, let's say, are not in the physical or what we might call ordinary reality. This is our ordinary reality. So you could shift your consciousness, enter that other dimension with your consciousness, or access that other dimension where, for me, I went to one college and another me is going to the other college, and to learn from that other me. What did they experience that could be relevant to me now? Because they're actually both aspects of our consciousness. And this is the key point, I think, with all type of clairvoyant or consciousness technologies, and we might call that the awakening, is that we're making things that are subconscious more conscious to us. So in many respects, those other lives are probably affecting us subconsciously. We just don't acknowledge or in our awareness that information or that effect came from those other lives. We just assume there are some forces that are influencing us now, or maybe something we just don't know about, but that still influence us. So this is one way to work with those other lives, other timelines.
Yeah, okay, that is amazing. So in this series, we're talking about the whole gamut of timelines, our individual personal timelines in this incarnation, and also for the collective. And so being in a vibration for this incarnation, this timeline, is how we fuel the new timeline for the highest benevolent outcome. But you mentioned something there, these parallel lives and these past lives. And the most interesting, fascinating thing to me is future lives that, this is where we go quantum, where we are outside of time and space. So it really is just really fascinating that our beingness is like a sphere, like we don't really have a beginning and an end. So to wrap our head around that is quite a challenge. So it's very interesting. Now, we're going to be doing 3 classes together with you. These are live transmissions with the Arcturians. They're so beneficial and helpful for us because of the frequencies that were put in. What's going to happen in these sessions? It's really fascinating. Can you go over how you came up with this transmission series yourself?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think one of the ways to understand, what you just mentioned, and that's how these transmissions, the 3 segments are or sessions are set up, is we were talking about one particular life, and then how every decision creates a bifurcation point and multiple timelines. That's one understanding, I think, of this idea of infinite timelines. The other is what you're mentioning is sort of infinite lives, past, present, and future. And the idea with that is that they're all occurring simultaneously. And like you just mentioned, that's very hard to wrap our mind around, because our reference point is this local personality, is one of those incarnations. But, and people might be aware of this channeler, the Seth material, just in case you wanted to see someone who, had brought through maybe from another dimension through her channel of Seth, Jane Roberts. It's called Oversoul 7. And I think that's a very straightforward framework, that if we assume that our highest self, we might call it the oversoul, which is the word the Seth used, is outside space time. And then the oversoul kind of gives energy, consciousness that incarnates. Let's say my oversouls gave energy that showed up in this body and this personality, of course, that was somewhat, well, much more very constructed, was given a name by my parents. And then through experience, I refer to myself as Gene's life. But that same oversoul could have given energy and consciousness to another incarnation that was like in the Tibet in the 1300s, which, like I'm making it somewhat relevant because I have this very attraction to Tibet now, and that spirituality. But from the oversoul's perspective, those two lives actually are occurring at the same time because it's outside space time. So, but from our this personality, it seems like how would that be occurring simultaneously? Because I'm in 2023, whereas 1300s is, like 700, 800 years ago. So it won't make sense to if you reference yourself to one of those personalities, but it would make sense to if you refer to yourself as the oversoul, which is outside space time. So, anyways, the main thing I think on a practical note is that life in Tibet versus, and there's other lives, and in the Oversoul 7, I guess there's like 4 or 5 lives that are kind of presented that are interconnected, and you see how they work. Just as an example, they're all simultaneously influencing each other. And our decisions now are influencing those lives too, because they're all linked up through the oversoul, which is sort of like this main network hub. And so that has a lot of implications. And we can influence other lives now. If we have that framework, then again we can use these consciousness technologies, alter our consciousness, access those other lives, interact with those other lives now, receive information. But then the interesting thing is we could influence those other lives now from where we are. So this we're probably already doing that in our dream space, in our subconscious space. And again, this idea of someone who's more awakened, or ourselves as a more awakened being, ourselves as a more clairvoyant or a clairsentient person, we're just making all that subconscious influence and effect more conscious. So yeah, so back to their transmissions. That's really, I think, the main direction of the transmissions, and interdimensional beings who are already in that conscious awareness, maybe like the Arcturians, like angelic beings. When we're ready, they would. It's kind of like taking someone from the first grade and maybe trying to teach them college mathematics. If you're not quite like ready for that, yeah, if we think about ourselves 10, 20 years ago, maybe this conversation is just doesn't make any sense. But now people probably listening to this because of probably certain experiences in their spiritual path, or they're already working this way. They're like, yes, yes, yes. Everything we're saying, they're like, yes, because it confirms what they've already been intuiting. So they're already at like 11th, 12th grade math or something, and so we're ready to take, college math, so to speak. So these beings, they'll walk with us with a linear time frame and assist us. And then kind of when we get to that point that we're ready to kind of be multi temporal, I think is the word here, to recognize, okay, this is just one incarnation. I could work with another incarnation. And ultimately, this isn't even who I really am. I'm more what I'm referring to as that oversoul or higher soul, higher self. So that's just how these higher beings can work. So these transmissions are sort of expanding our consciousness. We'll also go over some of these tools I was mentioning, shamanic journeying, some active meditation tools. They're basically, how do I shift my consciousness so I can start accessing these other lives directly, the information. I'll kind of stop there. I'll kind of go more into the transmissions, but I'll just stop there to see if there was anything to unpack up to that point.
Yes, it's really fascinating that we can be present and we can become multidimensional in our awareness of these other experiences. So when you're tracing this for your own self, or someone who's listening to this wants to begin on that journey to look at possible past lives or future lives, and where we get that, where we tune into the information in that life, Wow. What is it? How can we recognize, like you mentioned Tibet, because you have a strong resonance to Tibet in this lifetime, you're aware of an obvious lifetime there. And we've discussed this in our events together. I think like our group, people that group together are part of those lives as well. Like we're sharing past lives together. And that explains when we meet someone where we instantly know them. So my question is then, is that how we identify? Is that how we trace and track these other lives, these other experiences, by wisdom that comes from within us? It's not just our imagination, but there's something there then. And that's an indicator to pay attention. They're like road signs. I see it as.
Yeah, I think that's great. I think you brought up a great point for these indicators of how this starts to work consciously, and also how we can start to work with this actively is these I call them emotional intensity points in our lives. So, one way that this works is think of a time maybe you were in crisis in this life, and maybe there was some inspiration that got you through that. For people who were had the framework of like listening to guides or listening to angels, or this kind of way to somewhat funnel that inspiration. There may have been a sense that like some in a dream, or maybe you listen to a guide, like some voice said, just hang on, like don't give up, don't take your life, this kind of intensity. And actually, that could be your future self coming back to you. And we'll learn a technique where you can go back to a time in this life where you were younger, of course, and maybe we're in a crisis situation, and you'll be your angel guide who will come there and maybe do an energy healing for yourself. Maybe drop a ball of white light, or say something to that younger self of yours. And you see, now we're actually going back. A future self is going back to a past self in this life to help them through. And actually, it might change yourself now. That's just a fascinating thing. And there are techniques. You can go further back using the same technique. You could go back to a past life of yourself. Maybe you don't remember when you were in crisis, but to help that inversion of yourself. And of course, people are thinking, and I would think the same thing. There probably is a future self of yours, maybe in this life, in a future life, where you can go help them too. And then just to say, this isn't limited to your own timeline too. Sometimes using this technique as a form of service, your guides may take you into the past, where they'll just tell you what to do for some group. Now, how does that experience is, it's experienced as if like a group was praying or doing some ritual for some spiritual assistance, and you are actually the spiritual assistance going back to whenever. It could have been our version in Tibet, or doesn't have to even be our lives. And you're the one who's actually giving them the information, giving them the energy. So like right now, if you experience, now coming back to your present self, how that might work, sometimes we do these contact meditations the background. That's Mount Taranaki in New Zealand, but usually I have Mount Shasta, but usually these mountains are great sites to do ET contact. So you see these interdimensional beings, you take orb photos, these spiritual orbs show up. And what a lot of shamans saying, like even remember some shamans from Peru specifically were saying, yes, these light craft and stuff, these are actually our future selves. Exactly what I was saying, coming back. They already have that in their framework. Not only that, they're probably more experienced. They're doing the calculus for a couple of years. They were probably really experienced the multidimensional reality that way. So they kind of just view those craft, and they're like, yeah, some of these are our future selves. Maybe it's 1,000 years in the future, coming back just to show up. And so that's how this fascinating, but it's starting to make more sense once you also learn the technique. it will make more embodied sense.
This is really fascinating, and it really is helping to to illustrate our multidimensionality and what happens when there is no time and space, and how we are all connected. And so when this information becomes more mainstream, when people truly understand that, yes, we are all connected in this way, that our souls have lived many lives, there really will be no more war on this planet, right? How can it even exist? That's mind-blowing. So it's really comforting to know that as humanity awakens in this way, with this information, we will be kinder to each other. And I think we're starting to see that happen, right? We're starting to see, yes, that we can respect all life in all ways. And so, wow, this work is important in that sense. So I was going, you got my telepathy, or you got, you're very psychic, because I was going to say, as you were sharing there, that last passage, I was like, it's like when people say the ETs are us from the future, and then you said it out loud. It was like, wow, okay, we can get that. We can see that. So this is significant for the work, the energy work that we can do. So when we're talking timelines, there's a couple things going on here. We're not just going back and cleaning up some of these subconscious imprints, negative imprints on our timeline, but we're actually healing, not only healing, but influencing. I love that word. So as we influence, maybe you want to talk about this before we go into each of these transmissions. You might want to share how someone, so many light workers watching and listening can feel heavy-hearted with what's going on in the world, and they can feel like they want to help and do something. So this opens a beautiful opportunity for people really to help, right? It shows us how we can step up in a way with this timeline work and help. So the tools that you're going to teach about meeting our future self and going back and cleaning up, this is all part of it. It's all significant. Can you expand on this a little bit more about how this really is a beautiful opportunity for everyone watching to step up and do significant spiritual work for the collective?
Yeah, yeah, I think no, that's great, and we'll go now maybe deeper into what's happening at each session and some of those tools and like what practical sort of effects that has on our life now. Because that's kind of the one that where there must be a reason we're mostly conscious of this life, and what we're doing is expanding our awareness into where our soul may be and existing in other dimensional states and how these are all interconnected. But one way to think about it is like information gathering, like coming from science, really, science is one of the ways science takes a major leap forward is a new tool is developed. Like when I was in science, they developed something called a two-photon microscopy, which allowed you, rather than, you want to look at a living tissue, you have to stain it, means it becomes dead, and then you dye it, and then you like slice it really thin, and then you can look at it under a microscope. And that's how we discovered like the nervous system was made out of cells, or the neurons. They actually thought it was just one continuous gelatinous material back almost like only 100 years ago. So but the two photon microscope allowed you to see things, living cells, so that you could actually look at living tissue. And so then you could, like, we looked at how the cells in the neuron in the brain migrate. They usually migrate during development to their location. So we could capture those on movies in real time. Why do I bring that up? Is because if you get a consciousness tool and a framework to access information, like I was saying, that's usually subconscious, or even just for that, I mean, that most people would consider that non-existent. Like they're just not aware that some other life is affecting their life now in another time period. That's actually your life, your oversoul's life. But now you can consciously, actively, in real time, access that information. Then you take a quantum leap forward in your life, just like you take a quantum leap forward. Maybe that's why I use the word quantum in the title. Quantum leap forward in science when you have a new tool. So a new tool of it could be a new framework, but also a new consciousness tool in this case. So, for example, one of the things we feel like is things that happened in the past, let's say this life, maybe we made a decision, maybe we regret that decision when we were 30. Uh, within this framework, everything's fluid. So you could go back to that period in time. Let's say I'll just use one of the ways you use shamanic journeying. It's not the only way we'll learn, but you use that drumming to alter your state, and then you journey with your awareness to that younger you, and you just put your hands on them and send some Reiki energy to them. That will change. In this framework, is changing their life, is changing that time. It's fluid still. And what you'll see is that then you come back in this life and you may already feel different now than you did before, but then you stay aware, in the next couple of hours, days, your dreams, next week or so, to changes that are occurring in your life now. They may or may not seem directly related, or you'll probably get a hit from the spirit world, or your higher self, the oversoul, that you've made a change, not only in that prior existence of you at 30, but also now. So, one of the key points here, we are going to take it all from intellectual first, but then experiential next, and then moving forward from the date of the events, because we'll see how this unfolds. But that past life, anything in the past is still fluid. That's one of the biggest implications, because I think one of the biggest forms of suffering is regret. We regret missing opportunities. We regret having said those things. We regret, whatever it might have been. Just in this life, we don't have to think about. Of course, we could go back to past lives, but just to keep it very real, just in this life, so we can start there with what's most relevant. So that would be the past life piece. That will be the first day one of our session. The transmission kind of downloads that energetically into our system. I think there's an accelerated learning capacity with the transmissions that will be held by our higher guides, angelic beings at this level of awareness, which most of them are, and the Arcturians, since that seems, it's kind of an overlay here of help. Then the second transmission is, how do we work with lives that are going on right now? We're kind of implying that even the past and future ones are, but maybe we're working now more with those other lives that we made a decision here. So, and then there's still another parallel life that's going on with the decision B rather than A. What can you do with those lives? How can you access that information? And there'll be a repetition in the framework, meaning what you pointed out, it's a two-way street, meaning you can both influence that life, but that life can influence us. So we sometimes think, oh, I can go to that life and just receive information and benefit from that. And that's true. That's very true. That's sort of like that life influencing us. But we could also influence that life, which will also have a retroactive or a proactive effect on our current life. So that will always be the framework. So that will be working with these parallel lives. And then finally, similar to the past lives, although we haven't experienced it yet in this consciousness, we have a future time. It could still be within our lifetime now, or a future life that we could go to, we could learn from. There's already people who have done this and kind of written about it. Like I'm thinking of the Spirit Walker series that was done, where this author journeyed to his future self that was 2,000 years in advance from his present, and was able to kind of see what was going on the planet. North America was, like, most of it was underwater at the time, and so kind of learned from that future self, and in some ways was probably like a bridge influencing both back and forth. So, we can work this entire timescape, and that's kind of how these three transmissions are separated.
It's really fascinating. And I know that as you're speaking, we're all looking at different aspects of our lives, parallel lives, future lives, and looking at ways that we can do a little bit of cleanup, reclaim, connect, and influence. Wow. And so on a larger scale, as we're talking oneness, I can see now we are all related. We're all one. I can see that now so much more clearly. And just that concept, like it's all us, right? At some point, it must become all us. Like we are everything. We are. You and I are we're all connected.
Mm.
And when we're all one, I know we have individual souls and that soul journey, but wow, beautiful. Like my mind is expanding just thinking about this, and it's hard to talk sometimes, but isn't that beautiful where we can start to sense that the universe is inside us, like it's all us. It's all us, but yet we're
Mm.
so individuated. It's almost like I'm seeing an image of a waterfall where we're all the water, but as that water goes over the fall and it comes out into individual drops and then always comes back in, that's how I'm seeing it. And wow. So there really is no blame. There's no one to blame in our life. We can tend to blame ourselves, but instead of blaming ourselves, just go back or go to that time and heal it, fix it, correct it, infuse it with better intentions. And this is the awakening journey. How cool is that? That's very cool.
Yeah, I mean, it's fascinating that, like you said, I think one of the things you pointed out that I hadn't mentioned or wasn't thinking about is, the best way to work with this are these intensity hotspots. That's kind of where we know that maybe there's like these vortex occurring temporally, and people might even from now until if they join us for the transmissions if something intense occurs emotionally. Could be positive or negative in terms of how you, I guess, judge it. But there's sort of like times in the day or times in our life where it's sort of just more intensity. And I think that's when future and past and parallel information can be coming in. And you can just like sorry to use this example, but sometimes when people get a migraine or going back to my neuroscience, or an epileptic seizure, you have something called an aura. It's sort of like you start to, people who've had this a lot, they recognize when it's about to occur because something is starting to like kindle inside them. It's the same with these intensity hotspots. Something you want to, we'll go over this in the class, but something will start to point to you like, oh, something really important is happening, going to happen in my life. It doesn't have to be super intense, like the most important thing, but kind of these karmic things start to come into fruition, and you start to notice that maybe people already know what I'm talking about, but didn't put into context that, oh, this is a temporal opening where some past, future, or parallel life, or all of them, are influencing us now. And that's probably when, like, we do the one into our past, like say, okay, choose a time when you want to help your younger self. You're actually you're now the information going back to that. The reason you're choosing that time, it was an intense and emotional time, and there's probably a portal opening there and
Mm.
going back now to help that self because there's a little bit of an opening because you probably wouldn't go back when you're just having lunch when you were 13. You don't remember it. You don't, there's no magnetism to that particular date and time. So that's one of the things maybe to think about in your life now, between maybe now and when we meet, are when were these past in my this life, just because it may be easier to remember, times that were really important, intense, could have been a crisis, could have been a happiest moment in your life. Because we're going to work with those. You could probably work with them now. And then now in the present, if anything comes up like that, it probably notice the signs right before it happens. And maybe you'll now start to even access, you'll be like, yeah, I think some future information came in and I was able to kind of sidestep something that seemed to be go maybe not as fruitful, and then you can now track where that information came, just because we're now more aware that it could come from the future or parallel of the past life.
Yeah, very fascinating tools of consciousness. It's really very interesting. I've heard people refer to those intense emotional periods as node points, nodes, or
Mhm.
nodal points. And so, yeah, that's very crucial. When you were talking about, a time in your life that was intense, one thing came in particular in my memory, and I put it off as maybe an angel, but now I'm recognizing that could be my future self. It was very intense. My mother had passed, and I was very sad and in despair. And something lifted my shoulders up, and like a wave just went over me. And now I'm recognizing what that was. And so this is like a muscle that we're working, and we're getting better and better at it. As you said, with tools like this, we'll be able to recognize when it's coming on and open up to it and not be unconscious. So that really is beautiful. That is powerful, very empowering for all of us. And so hindsight's 2020 as we go along and work this out and recognize, wow, in 2020, I felt something kind of weird. I felt kind of nervous about something. And then you go through your life and something occurs. And then in hindsight, you look at it and you go, that's why I was feeling that way. This is what we're talking about now. So that's exciting to me as being a human, as developing our multidimensionality, our skills as a multidimensional being, because it comes back to we can't blame anyone. And so it's beautiful as we're thinking about a timeline for Earth. We know New Earth is a frequency. Once we do all this cleanup and we're using these tools of consciousness, then the lower frequencies of shame, guilt, doubt, greed, fear will no longer have its hold over us anymore. So this is a great lesson in life that we're learning, wouldn't you think? Wow.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I think that's great. And I know NLP actually has a technique called timelines where you
Mhm.
track the way you perceive time. Like basically I could ask you, just remember yesterday when you were brushing your teeth. And some people they actually visualize it a certain place. And then I would just say, like, now visualize yourself, here and now. And usually it's somewhere here. And then I would say, like, okay, visualize yourself, just like not too far away, but like tomorrow or like in 1 week or a couple of days joining us. So then it's over here. And then you just connect those 3 points, and that's your timeline. And also your particular way of, here I had a kind of past here, present here. I was somewhat making it up, and future here, because everyone's unique in the way they do that. And so that's your timeline, and you can insert things into that line that will affect your consciousness. It's a beautiful technique, and we'll go over that too. It just was coming back to me now that NLP has this very cool technique that uses that term timeline.
Okay, well, again, this is very exciting. And again, I love that word empowering, because it shows us to really be that mindful person, to be mindful, to be kind to ourselves, to raise our frequency, to know that our frequency matters, our love matters because of how we are existing and creating in our world. So it's very, very cool. And maybe this is our higher selves coming in to share this right now. But to me, I take great comfort in all of this. And that just brings a lot of excitement. It's almost like we're excited to face those triggers now, right? We're excited to go into times or points where we're not so proud of our behavior, or our behavior was not so becoming, and actually fix it. And you were talking about, those 3 points. That's the power of triangulation. And so we're excited for more consciousness tools. In a moment, we're going to do a little mini session with you so people can feel the frequencies. But I just wanted to say that every time we are in these meetings, Jean, with you and the beautiful beings who show up, it's like family. There's such a huge opening and growth that happens when we're all together, and an expansion. And so it's always exciting to see what comes up for the group. Even if those are watching it in the replay, they're still in that group energy. And wow, it's so supportive. Did you want to add anything about the group experience? Because for me, it's like a highlight every month.
Yeah, I think in some ways we're intentionally creating a temporal portal a lot of when we do these meetings, these transmissions, because we're inviting the higher beings, and now maybe we could expand the higher beings to our past, our present, our parallel, and our future selves. They probably were already coming in, but now we kind of, we have this framework to understand that they may be actually the ones who are part of that vortex that we create as a group. And I think that's why there's such insights that people are getting, they're sharing, and that was the point that you were bringing up that I guess they didn't get a chance to verbally say is, these timelines are interconnected to everyone else, other beings. And so maybe one additional thing to which I think is part of that very active temporal portal is uh, who is around. I kind of focused on just us. Just like I'll go back to a time you wanted to help your younger self, but who else was around that was a big part of that mix, because that was probably an important opening for them. It was like all part of a net, and they may be like their past, future, and parallel self now is being influenced too by you changing yourself, even if you just focus on yourself. So I think that's a big part of maybe we're pointing out, and maybe we're unpacking this more, like what makes up these temporal vortices, these temporal openings. And a lot of times it's collective. It's a number of people, at least more than just ourselves. There's probably at least one more other being who's directly involved. And that's very conservative. There are probably a number of beings who are affected by that nodal point that we are kind of interested in. Um, yeah, yeah. I know we were going to do maybe a little experience here.
Yes, this conversation, as we meet for our group, we can expand it even further. There's more questions that come up. We didn't even get to the Mandela effect, which that's fascinating. But I just wanted to say as well as that, we've heard spiritual teachers say that even our guides are aspects of us. And so, yeah, it's mind expanding, and I'm trying to articulate it. But again, it feels so empowering that it's all us. I get that even more now. Okay, so let's do a few moments of a transmission. Tell us what we're going to do here.
Yeah, we're gonna work with the energies, our future self, the future self energies, the download. The download will help it make us more those future selves more accessible. And, it doesn't have to be so huge. It's better to do these conscious experience that are relevant, because that brings in sort of this desire nature. But if you are going to join us, or even if you aren't, maybe these are going to be occurring next Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday. So let's also, at some point, I'm going to bring our Friday self in. Whether you do this or not, I'm sure everyone who's here is going to be benefiting just from thinking about this now. So we're also going to access the wisdom of our Friday self. Maybe we did the transmissions and receive some of the wisdom already from that self, as if they've already experienced all the transmissions and all the discussions and all the experiences. And so we can directly play with what we're working with here, because that Friday self actually in this framework exists already. That would be the idea. Okay, so there'll be two parts. It won't be long. The first is the download to just have more of that, I guess, awareness, understanding, and insight to work with any of our future selves. And we'll be asking our guides, the divine, our guides, particularly our higher self, that oversoul that's already aware of all our selves, past, present, parallel, and now we're focusing on the future, as well as the Arcturians to help us. This would be similar to the transmission on day 3, that kind of energy of the Mastery Empowerment class. We're starting the transmission of working with our future selves. now the transmission energies, we're directly accessing the our future self next Thursday, just to give some coordinates, which always helps the mind. We'll make it next Friday, our future self next Friday, which is June 14th. And any wisdom and understanding from that future self. Maybe you took the mastery empowerment class, or maybe you're just much more, we'll all be more aware, even by a couple of days. And that future self is downloading any relevant information to us now. And either by the end of this transmission or within the next 24 hours, we'll receive one insight from that information that can help us now. You're just making a request to the Oversoul. Just make your request simple like that, but effective and relevant. If you want, even if, since we're in this altered state, you could even imagine your future self about a week from now, and you could even ask it one question. Just trust you're receiving the answer, whether you understand it or not, whether you trust it or not. It's more an energetic exchange ultimately. And it occurs instantly as soon as you intend it. Because this, we're already interconnected with all our future, past, and parallel selves. We're just really making it more conscious to us. If you did the visualization, you can simply thank your future self for the assistance. And when you feel comfortable, you can come back to your body, moving your fingers and your toes. When you feel good, you can open your eyes and snap your fingers.
Okay, that was so precious. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Wow. I I always used to I love to describe the sensation that I experienced with some words. And first off, the feeling of confidence, just confidence, happy, and relax. Quit taking ourselves so darn seriously. Just relax. We've got this, right? We've got this. That was really huge. Don't doubt. Don't worry. Relax. And I actually flipped a week ago. I took a look back at a week ago and realized the growth that we've each had in just the past few days in the week. So it's wonderful. What a powerful tool. Thank you, Jean. And do you want to share any experience or anything that you noticed?
Oh yeah, yeah. I felt a downpour of the like a connection spiritually above the head when we started, and particularly when we connected to our future self 7 days. I got the message that I'll be more expanded. You know, that was the gist of the transmission from that future self. And a couple of things came to mind that maybe were coming from somewhere. Maybe I'll just attribute to the future self or my past self. It reminded me of the name of that sci-fi novel. It's The Man in the High Castle by Philip K. Dick. If people are really into this sort of alternate timelines, and I think this author was very much experiencing alternate universes and kind of just found an outlet through that was acceptable to society through fiction, through science fiction. But he probably was writing by it through his, connection to the alternate universe where like the Allies did not win the World War II, or so-called win. But I'm not sure there's any winners in the war. But so, anyways, yeah, there was one thing else also that came to mind is if you want to make this kind of very practical and even bring it faster to home that you could just practice, but you can usually get results right away. Is your this is also NLP technique that I learned is let's say you're trying to be a better writer. So you're right about to do your writing session or whatever it is that you skill you do. You imagine your slightly better self, which would be your future self, your slightly better self who's slightly better at writing. You imagine them right in front of you, facing the same way you're facing, and you kind of either step into them or pull them into you. So you kind of step into them, you kind of merge with that future self of yours that's slightly better than you are now at writing, because let's say that's the activity you're about to do. You merge that with yourself. And then I just added this because it's a kind of a quantum information exchange. Just say integrate, activate, and unpack now. Those three kind of commands to the quantum information: integrate, activate, unpack now. And then just and do your session and see how maybe you feel like it's flowing more, like what Lauren mentioned. You're writing better. It could be anything. Could be exercising. Could be tennis. Whatever, cooking. Whatever your future better self is. Interviewing, giving interviews. You just step into that better self of yours.
I love it. Yes. Okay. And this is why I feel so excited, because it's I'll use that word empowering one more time. Okay. Very cool. I wanted to say, yay, feminine on our YouTube channel got the man in the high castle. Excellent.
Oh,
Bonus. You get a bonus prize, feminine. Okay. Good. Well, this has been really powerful. We thank everyone for watching and joining us, and we invite you to join us for these 3 transmissions. You can join us live or you can join by the recording. We are always expanded and hearts are wide open. These events always, they give us fresh insight. So this is really very, very fun. And I'll say excited one more time to see everybody again in our space. Thank you, Jean. And did you want to say something about Hank Wesselman here?
yeah, he was the author I was trying to remember who did all those journeys to his future self, 2000 years from now. And he felt like there was kind of this, his higher self was creating this bridge between these two incarnations. And he wrote that trilogy. I mean, saying, there's people who've really practiced these for themselves, really unpacked that information. And if you're inspired by this and just want to make it, because your conscious mind needs, in order to really embody it, you kind of have to really believe it. And it's so at some, first take, people were open enough to listen to the conversation, let's say. But if you kind of really say like, oh, this person really, access their future self, whether it's the high man in the high castle, whatever resonates with you, or Hank Wesselman, writing 3 books that became bestsellers on accessing his future self. It could be enough to really make it like, okay, I can do this. Like, and then like this information I'm getting, is real and relevant to me, the one that you will be accessing for yourself.
Okay, well, thank you for that. Really good information. As people can see from your speaking and your wisdom, you are a prolific reader, and you always share beautiful stories and information and books. But primarily the tools of consciousness that you teach are really helpful for all of us. So we're looking forward to that. And again, we have a bonus for people who purchase this series. It is the Arcturian broadcast transmissions. And that was very, very cool. That again was another expansive webinar. Jean, do you want to share anything on that? That is a free bonus for everyone.
Oh yeah, the broadcast transmission I think works really well with this, and that's the fact that that we're our consciousness like it's really focused on the interconnectedness that we talked about with each other consciously that Lauren was mentioning. We're really one. We are one. We are one. We are one. It's kind of a mantra of invocation you can say sometimes before healing, before you meditate, just to recognize this interconnectedness that we both our state of consciousness, our vibration goes out to other people, mostly subconsciously. We don't, it's always going out. People are always connecting to us. It doesn't have to always be when we're physically talking, as well as like we're receiving, other beings, other people's, other environments, information. So we're really like a broadcast tower, and how to make that more sharp or more conscious. That's what the three transmissions in the Arcturian broadcast transmission series is about.
Yes, okay. It's a beautiful experience and it comes as an immediate download once you register for this series. All right. Well, thank you, Jean, and thank you everyone for watching and joining us. We really hope to see you. And if not, it's all right. We hope that you have gained some wisdom from this conversation on timelines and how beautiful and empowered you are with mind expanding information. You are the miracle. Thank you, Jean. Thank you, everyone. Namaste.
That's it. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks. Thank you for listening to this quantum conversation, and thank you for dancing with us to the cosmic heart. As we raise our own vibration, we raise the vibration of the planet. This show is dedicated to you and all awakening hearts as we are here to shine our bright light and amplify our love. I'm Loren Gailey, and from my sacred heart to yours, I honor your magnificent love and light. This has been a presentation of New Earth One Network, your home for New Earth living. Access information, education, and videos on living from the heart in unity consciousness. Visit newearth1.com.